Hi guys, it's me, Chester HD, and welcome to a live Practice 1 and Practice 2 review for the 2018 Russian Grand Prix. How are we doing, guys, on this Friday? Russia, as we know, not the greatest track in the world. As you can see there, a very poor track in terms of layout, but here we are at the Russian Grand Prix, and will the championship kind of be decided fully this weekend? We'll have to see what happens. But again, guys, how are we doing? Are we excited for this weekend? Are we not looking forward to this weekend's race? Because as we know, again, this track can throw up quite a boring race sometimes. Before we move on though, I just want to know, guys, is everything in terms of the stream working alright, or is there any issues? I just want to know. Hey to James, Eric, Gamer Ben, Gina, Dan Fiend, Lucas, Legendary Snipers. Is there any issues on the stream, or is it all good? It's fine. Okay, right, I'll continue on. Thanks for letting me know. That's from Simon Cragland. Now, we'll move on to the actual results for Practice 1 and Practice 2. This is Practice 1. Sebastian Vettel was fastest, from Max Verstappen second, Hamilton third, Bottas fourth, Ricciardo 5th, Ocon in P6, Kimi Raikkonen 7th, Kevin Magnussen 8th, Nico Hülkenberg 9th, and very surprisingly, Antonio Giovinazzi in P10. As we'll get onto later, Giovinazzi has been announced as one of the Sauber drivers for 2019. And then the next 10 in Practice 1 was Grosjean in P11, Gasly P12, Lando Norris, of course, he will be driving for McLaren next season. He was 13th and Leclerc was 14th. Markelov in 15th, of course. This is his home race, so they were always going to give him a Friday practice outing. Van Dorn is 16th. Latifi, Friday driver, again in P17. Sirotkin at his home Grand Prix in P18. Hartley 19th, and then Lance Stroll quite clearly at the back of the field. And then for Practice 2, this was the top 10. Lewis Hamilton was fastest, from Valtteri Bottas second, Verstappen third, Ricciardo fourth, Vettel fifth, Raikkonen sixth, then Perez in P7. Surprisingly, Pierre Gasly in P8, then Esteban Ocon 9th, and surprisingly again, Marcus Ericsson in P10. So Sauber looking good so far here in Sochi. And then the bottom 10 is Magnussen in P11, then Sainz, Leclerc, Hülkenberg, Grosjean, Hartley, Alonso, Van Dorn, Sirotkin, and Lance Stroll. Those are your Practice 1 and Practice 2 results. But now let's go on to the top 3 teams and review how they did in practice today. First off, of course, is the World Champions and Championship leaders, Mercedes. And their car, in Practice 1, it wasn't looking amazing, but in Practice 2, definitely it was looking the best out there on the grid. They look better than Ferrari at this current stage. Of course, Ferrari on a Friday, as we'll get onto in a minute, they do tend to sandbag and hold back pace on a Friday, but in terms of grip, I think Mercedes look better around this track. Of course, it's a very high speed track when it comes to the corners. Mercedes, with their car, they love high speed corners. Just look at, Australia early in the season, and Austria and Silverstone. Tracks with high speed corners is what the Mercedes car loves, and that's what Russia, when it comes to the corners, is. All the corners, excluding maybe 2 or 3, are high speed, and that's exactly why Mercedes in Practice 2 ended up with a 1-2. And going into qualifying, I'd have to say I think they're the favourites for pole position right now. I think Ferrari will improve a lot overnight. Of course, they'll turn it up more for Practice 3 and of course qualifying, but right now, if I had to pick someone for pole, it'd have to be Hamilton or Bottas. It'd have to be a Mercedes driver. It'd have to be. They look very good right now, do Mercedes. We'll move on from them, though, and go on to Ferrari, who, in Practice 1, they looked Well, in terms of the timesheets with Sebastian Vettel, it was looking good, but the car in terms of grip all day just hasn't looked hooked up to this track. It just hasn't had the grip, say like the Mercedes has or the Red Bull has. Again, I know on a Friday that Ferrari turn their engine down, but in terms of grip, I just don't see that raw pace from Ferrari in terms of the grip of the car. I've not been really impressed with the grip of the car in practice so far, because normally, you know, this season, even if they've gone on to dominate a race or dominate in qualifying, but in Friday practice have not been quick, in terms of the aero and the grip of the car in Friday practice, it's still been good, but of course not been fastest because they haven't turned, you know, the engine up to, say, what Mercedes have or Red Bull have with their Renault power unit. The Ferrari, I know they've got their engine turned down, but it just doesn't look right now like a car that can go and win the Russian Grand Prix. I just don't see it right now. And Sebastian Vettel had a spin in practice too during his race runs. So a lot of work for Ferrari to do overnight with some setup changes for sure. Ferrari have to improve the grip of that car. And we'll go on to Red Bull, who in terms of pace, I have to say, are looking a lot better than I thought. Now, when it comes to one lap pace, it doesn't matter because both Red Bull drivers, in case you did not know, will be starting the Russian Grand Prix from the back of the grid because of engine penalties. They've gone back to the B-spec Renault power unit. So what they do in qualifying or what they do when it comes to one lap pace does not matter. It's all about race pace for the two Red Bulls. But looking at their one lap speed, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. And if they didn't have those penalties and they actually did qualifying, I don't think they will actually seriously compete in qualifying. But if they didn't have those penalties and did compete in qualifying, Red Bull wouldn't be massively far off. So Red Bull's pace is looking good, but today was all about, really, for Red Bull, nailing the setup for the race. That was all today was about, because yes, they set some very good pace when it came to, you know, at the start of practice 2 with the one lap speed, but it doesn't matter because, of course, of those penalties. But guys, what do you think of Mercedes? Do you think Mercedes are the favourites to get pole position and maybe get the race win with Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas, who of course is very good at this track? Do you think Ferrari will massively improve over the night and into tomorrow will be very good and maybe get pole? And for Red Bull, when it comes to, say, the race, do you think there's enough there for them to maybe somehow, if there's a safety car or something like that, challenge Mercedes or Ferrari? What do you guys think about those three teams? Let me see what some of you guys are saying. Simon Cragland, I still wonder why Vettel only has one soft tyre available. I think that one stop with hyper soft and ultra soft is difficult. The reason they've done that, and I actually agree with it, is because Russia, the track, it doesn't wear out tyres really at all. So it's going to be a one stop even if you go hyper soft to ultra soft. It is not going to be a massive issue on the tyres. So you don't really need to bring the yellow marked soft tyre at all, because this track is probably, if you're looking for a track that doesn't wear out the tyres, this is probably the best track for that, because we never get a two-stop race around Russia. We never get a two-stop race around Russia. Meter on Tube, I think. I don't know some of those names. Okay, I don't know what you're referencing there. Nicholas, one stopper, guys, to manufacture a one stop like Singapore, where they were lapping 12 seconds off of pole. Yeah, but even if they pushed very hard in the race, I still think they'll do a one stop, because the track just doesn't wear out tyres. It just does not. Meter and Cube, why all the new guys? That's because, you know, teams want to give new drivers or drivers that will be driving for them next year a chance to get in the car and learn, you know, ahead of time, so they're not learning in pre-season or the beginning of 2019. So that's why in practice 1 there were so many new drivers. Nicholas, Russia is a low abrasive circuit. Yep, that's exactly why we don't get tyre wear at this track. Simon Cragland, yeah, but I still think they should have brought 2 soft tyres to Vettel. Maybe, but again, tyre wear's not an issue here. If they did that maybe for next weekend, I haven't looked at the tyre choices. I don't know if they've... I know Ferrari have brought a lot of the softest compound for the next race in Japan, but, you know, if they did that in Japan, then maybe, yeah, that's an issue. But here I don't think it is, because, again, the tyres do not wear out at all. Spider Monkey, is there any chance for rain in qualifying? I haven't actually looked at the forecast. From history, it never normally rains at this track. So, or rains, you know, in Sochi. So, I don't think we will get rain, but who knows? Who knows? Simon Cragland, no rain this weekend. Yep, that's to be expected. Gina, Red Bull looking good actually. And I think Ferrari or Vettel will do a mistake during the race. So I think Max will get a podium. If Red Bull got a podium, even if they got maybe a bit lucky, it'd have to be a great performance in terms of car with the pace and driver. Because without a safety car, by the time the 2 Red Bulls, you know, get through the field, they're going to be half a minute at least off of the lead of the race. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult for them to get, you know, close to Mercedes and Ferrari. Nicholas, turn 2 will be interesting in the race. Yes, it will. It always is. Lots of drivers always go straight on down the escape road. We've had that plenty of times since this Grand Prix started. I think it's Ahmed asks, Ferrari upper hand on the straights. In the straight line, absolutely. Ferrari do have a better car in a straight line, but in the corners, the Mercedes looks more comfortable and just looks better than the Ferrari. But of course, if Mercedes get pole, but Ferrari with their great straight line speed get a great run down to turn 2, which they probably will if they are in that position, then they can get in the lead of the race and control the race from there until lap 53. So, yeah, it's a good advantage, you know, to have for Ferrari, having the upper hand in a straight line. I'll just read out a couple more before we go on to some more midfield teams. Legendary Snipers, I wonder if Hamilton will break the track record in Q3 with a 131 or 132. In Q3, I think we'll get a 131. I think we'll get a late 131. Something like that. Ahmed also asks, how is Merc turned their grip better than Ferrari? To be fair, I think Mercedes... I don't think Mercedes have necessarily all-around better grip than the Ferrari. I just think in the faster high-speed corners, the Mercedes is better. And it's been like that not only this season, but last season. The Mercedes was better in the high-speed corners. And Ferrari, they're not at a disadvantage to Mercedes when it comes to grip. It's just, again, in high-speed corners, they're not as quick as Mercedes. But in slow-speed corners, Ferrari are faster, for sure. Just looking at some more. Right, I'll read this last one out before I go to the rest of the teams. Gina, do you think Vettel looks defeated? Sky was talking about it after Singapore and the way he was kind of looking. I think that he thinks he's lost, for sure. he looked very depressed after Singapore. He looked like he kind of gave up. I'm not going to accuse him of that, but to me, he looks like he's given up on this championship. But we'll move on now to the midfield teams. First off is McLaren. McLaren in practice 1 weren't too bad with Lando Norris and Stoffel Van Dorn, but in practice 2, they were so far off the pace. Both cars right at the back with the 2 Williamses. And Fernando Alonso will be taking a engine penalty for the race. So what he does in qualifying doesn't really matter. Stoffel Van Dorn doesn't really have any pace, which is not a shock because he has not had any pace for, it seems, 10 or 15 races now. So McLaren, it just looks poor from McLaren. It looks as though McLaren have gone back to what they were like at Spa, at Monza. McLaren just don't look quick at all. I don't see how they can possibly get into Q3. And in the race right now, I would say unless there's a safety car and loads of crashes, I don't see how McLaren can realistically score points. I just don't see it. McLaren do not look good right now in terms of their pace. Next up is Renault. As expected, Renault are not looking quick. This is not a track that suits the Renault. The higher speed the track, the slower the Renault is going to be in comparison to teams like Haas and Force India. And Renault, to me, right now, look as though they are the 6th or maybe 7th fastest, just outside the top 10. And that is about right for where I thought they would be this weekend. Of course, in qualifying, that could improve and they could be in the top 10. Who knows? But I don't see it. I just don't see it. What you need at this track is power, which is something Renault don't have, and good speed in the high-speed corners. And Renault, they kind of have that, but they are a lot better in slower speed corners. They are. Singapore was clear proof of that. So I don't see Renault having a good weekend this weekend at all. They will probably lose out compared to Haas when it comes to scoring points. And next up is Force India, who to me look like they are best of the rest. Esteban Ocon was P6 in practice 1, splitting. I think it was Daniel Ricciardo and Kimi Raikkonen. And then Sergio Perez was P7 in practice 2 with Ocon in P9. That is, for me, clear evidence that Force India are best of the rest. No real surprise. I thought they would be at least 5th fastest and would have, their 2 cars just inside the top 10 or on the edges of the top 10 if they weren't having the greatest time in practice. But yeah, no real surprise for Force India. This track should really suit them if they're not looking out. Well, I wouldn't say looking out the 4th row, but if they're not, getting both cars, say, at least 7th and 9th, I would be quite disappointed with Force India because they really should be dominating that midfield this weekend. This track suits the Force India very well. But guys, what do you think about those 3 midfield teams? Do you think McLaren can do anything this weekend which is good in terms of scoring points? Do you think Renault will be better in qualifying in the race? Do you think they're sandbagging at all? And for Force India, do you think they are best of the rest? And do you think, like I do, that they are probably going to dominate the midfield in qualifying and the race and score some healthy points? Let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat. Simon Craglin, Force India has outdeveloped Haas and Renault, and they are doing such a good job. That's basically down to Lawrence Stroll, bringing in his money, allowing Force India to finally bring upgrades to the car. And that's why Force India now have basically returned to what they were like last year. This time last year they were clearly 4th fastest. They were kind of competitive at times with Renault, who would get close to them, or maybe a Williams. But they were clearly 4th fastest, and that is what they are right now. And if they continue like that, they're definitely going to beat McLaren in the Constructors. No doubt about it. Nicholas, Force India looked good. Yep. Renault, slow. I wouldn't say... Well, they're slow compared to what they want or where they want to be. But it's about where I think they or we expect them to be. I don't think it's, you know, they're not dramatically slower than what is expected. Nicholas also says, plus it's a power circuit-ish and they have better Mercedes power than Renault. Yep, it's basically a power circuit. I can't think really of any slow speed corners at all. I think maybe the slowest speed one is the one entering the final sector. That's probably the slowest corner on the track, but it's not that slow, and that just shows you how you have to have a good car, one in a straight line and also in the high speed corners. Spider Monkey asks, which is a better car at handling now, Haas or Force India? I'd have to say Force India after Singapore and what happened in qualifying. I'd have to say Force India. Sorry, not Singapore, because Singapore is a track which will show who has a very good chassis, and Force India proved that. So I'd have to say the Force India team, they've made a lot of progress in the last few races. Great to see, because I was very worried for them, say this time a couple months ago. Simon Cragland, wasn't Norris quicker than Van Dorn in FP1? He was. Norris was 13th and Van Dorn was 16th. That is not good reading for Van Dorn if he had any hope of getting a seat for 2019 in F1, which looks basically impossible now. Nicholas, McLaren are also trying the unique Russian Grand Prix setup. They are. I said that in my preview for the Russian Grand Prix, which, by the way, guys, is in the description down below if you want to check that out. Spider Monkey, McLaren should do more upgrade in their power. It's not up to them, I'm afraid. It's down to Renault. McLaren just have to hope that Renault actually start building a powerful and reliable engine. Simon Cragland, Sauber versus Renault for P11. After practice, it looks as though that's a genuine battle, but I think Renault will maybe move up slightly and Sauber might fall back a bit. We'll have to see though. That could, of course, change in qualifying. Spider Monkey says, is your throat okay now, Jazz? It's still not great. Of course, we've got, you know, races coming every, week or two now, so my throat isn't being given, you know, a lot of time to recover, but I'll have to soldier on, of course. Nicholas says, what's the deal with Stoffel, though? Doesn't look pretty. It's a combination of, I think he has a bit of self-doubt in himself. I don't think he fully believes in himself. And I also think because the McLaren car is a lot worse this season than we expected, and because the McLaren is just so poor, his performances look way worse than they would, say, if, you know, if McLaren were close to Red Bull but not quite close enough, and clearly ahead of Force India, Haas and Renault, and Fernando Alonso was still beating Van Dorn quite comprehensively, but Van Dorn was scoring points a lot. I don't think Van Dorn would be dropped from F1. It's the McLaren car, and its poor performance has a lot to do, I think, with Van Dorn's poor performances in terms of results. It has a lot to do with that, because we're looking upon it worse than maybe it actually is, because the McLaren is so bad. Shalang, disappointing day for Ferrari. Yeah, practice 1 was okay, I guess, but practice 2 was quite disappointing, to be behind not only the 2 Mercedes but the 2 Red Bulls. yeah, that's quite disappointing, and they have a lot of work to do overnight. Gina, Van Dorn is done. He is mentally out. I think Van Dorn said yesterday that he basically now has no chance of having a seat next year. So he's basically confirmed that he's not in F1 for next year. But we'll move on to the remaining midfield teams, guys. First up is Williams. They look like they are the slowest. Sergei Sorokin is, I would say, comfortably beating his teammate Lance Stroll. Not a real surprise because Sorokin, I think, when it comes to qualifying pace, is better than Stroll. And of course, it is Sorokin's home Grand Prix. So he's going to be more motivated to get a good result than, you know, Lance Stroll is. So Sorokin looking good. But Williams, yeah, very, very slow. Toro Rosso, you know what? Toro Rosso are not looking too bad. Pierre Gasly in practice 1 was in 12th. And then in practice 2, he was in P8. Does that mean, in terms of pace, that Toro Rosso are right up there with Force India and Haas? I don't think they are. And also, it doesn't really matter about their one-lap speed because both Toro Rosso drivers, Pierre Gasly and Brendan Hartley, will start the Russian Grand Prix at the back with the 2 Red Bulls and Fernando Alonso because of engine penalties. So their pace in practice 1 and practice 2, despite looking quite good, it doesn't really matter because they're going to be starting at the back. But if they have good race pace and there's a safety car, maybe they can do something. But I'm not going to hold my breath when it comes to Toro Rosso because I expected them to be great at Singapore, and yeah, they just weren't at all. Moving on to Haas, who in practice 1 weren't amazing, but weren't too bad. I thought they were actually quite decent in practice 1, but practice 2, quite a bad drop-off in terms of where they finished in, I think it was P11 and P15. Not that great, I'd have to say, for Haas so far here in Russia. I think they could have done a bit better when it comes to the pace of the car, but of course it's only Friday practice. Normally when it comes to qualifying, Haas produce a great result, and that's where Haas's best pace in the weekend comes, is qualifying. They are very good when it comes to qualifying. I think they will turn it around and get at least one of their cars into Q3, but there is still work to be done, because if they don't improve, then they might give Renault a slight opening for them to get into Q3 instead of Haas. And finally, we will go on to Sauber, who are looking good. They are looking good. Antonio Giovinazzi, even though he is not going to be driving the Sauber until next season, was very quick in practice 1 in P10, just showing that the Sauber so far looks very quick. And then Marcus Ericsson in practice 2 was in P10. So is the Sauber right up there in terms of pace? I'm not sure it is, because I don't know. I just don't think they are right up there in terms of pace when it's going to matter in qualifying. I think the Force India, I think the Haas, I think maybe Renault will be better than them. Sauber have disappointed when it comes to qualifying in the last few races. The last time Sauber really had a good qualifying was Hockenheim. So yeah, when it comes to qualifying, I'm not expecting them to maintain this. But in the race, because of penalties for the 2 Red Bulls, you know, Alonso, and the 2 Toro Rossos, they do have a strong chance, I feel, of scoring points, and should at least be competing hard for a points finish. But guys, what do you think of those 4 teams? For Williams, do you think they can do anything this weekend with of course, the home driver Sergei Sorokin? Do you think Toro Rosso's pace is looking good enough for maybe a surprise points finish on Sunday? For Haas, do you think they can challenge Force India to be best of the rest? And Sauber, do you think they can maintain that pace when it comes to qualifying and the Grand Prix as well. Let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat. Simon Craglin, Leclerc is struggling. Yeah, he's not doing that well. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. Nathan says, didn't get a notification. Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. The YouTube notification system is, well, it's poor, let's be honest. But if you want to get notifications for my videos and, you know, get it in a better way, then either follow me on Twitter or join the Discord server and pay attention to the notifications that happen in there, because that's a better way to keep up with what I'm doing than the YouTube notification system, because yeah, it's quite unreliable. Gamer Ben says Sauber will turn up for qualifying and the race. I hope they do. I hope they do. I'd love to see Sauber get a good finish with both Leclerc and Ericsson. By the way, when it comes to the news about Sauber and Haas and their driver lineups, we will get onto that very soon after I answer some of your guys' questions. Let me just look at some more. Gina, lol, how can Stroll be in F1 still? It's so frustrating when drivers like Ocon are without a seat. Sorry, but I had to write it is so... I fully agree. I fully agree with what you're saying. It's true. Lance Stroll, you can defend him all you want, but he is not good enough to be an F1. He is not good enough to be an F1. And I challenge anyone out there to give me a strong argument as to why he deserves to be an F1, other than he got a podium in Baku and he did a good qualifying lap once in Italy. Other than that, give me a strong, valid argument as to why he deserves to be an F1 ever. I don't think anyone can. I don't think anyone can. He is not consistently good enough. He does have good races, but it's not consistent enough. Sorokin, I think, has been better this season, but Lance Stroll has been good enough at the right times to score points and make it look like he's been better when he's not, in my opinion. I think Sorokin's been better. Qualifying has proven that. So, yeah, it is so frustrating, especially again when Ocon and maybe George Russell will be without a seat in 2019, and maybe Pascal Wehrlein. The list goes on. The list truly does go on. Nicholas, 400 jobs at Force India. I hate him, but his dad saved some people's livelihood. You know, I agree with that, but that doesn't excuse the fact. The fact for me is that Lance is not good enough to be in F1, in my opinion. Yes, his dad has saved Force India, but that doesn't mean his son should now get a drive for life at Force India. You know, it's so frustrating. So frustrating. Just looking at some more questions and comments in the chat. Nicholas says Roman was fearing getting into Q3 because of what happened in Singapore. I'm not quite sure what you're referencing, but okay. Spider Monkey Chazza, do you think Williams will drop Sorokin for Russell? They're not going to drop Sorokin, no way, because if Stroll does leave, which he is going to, then they have to keep money at the team with Martini going as a sponsor at the end of 2018. They have to keep money at the team, so they're going to have to keep Sorokin. And alongside, I think will be Russell. I think it'll be Sorokin and Russell for 2019. But there has been rumours that Ocon might get that seat. So, who knows, honestly, at this point. Zane, Stroll did very well against Massa. He deserves more credit. He's not a bad guy. You can hate. He worked very hard to get into F1. And money doesn't drive the person behind the wheel does. When you say Stroll did very well against Massa, in terms of points finishes and, you know, just the championship in general, yeah, he did. But you have to look at the results and say, you know, like Baku, that result was lucky, let's be honest. And by the way, Massa was ahead of Stroll until his rear damper broke. So Massa was going to finish ahead of Stroll in that Grand Prix. That Baku podium was the reason that Stroll was so close to Massa at the end of 2017. He did have some good points finishes, I'm not doubting that, but I think a few of them were down to crashes at the start, some chaos, loads of people retiring from races. You know, there were other factors causing those points finishes. And yeah, he has worked hard to get to F1, but the fact of the matter is he's in F1 because of his money. That is the first reason he's in F1, is because of money. And I don't think anyone can doubt that. Just looking at some more comments. Scotty says, remember Mick Schumacher has Ferrari ties as well and will probably be F3 champion with Prema this year. And don't think he's not looking at a seat at Sauber for as his entry to F1. Mick Schumacher, of course, doing very well right now. He will probably win the F3 championship. I think next season, I think he'll be in F2 next season. And then if he wins the F2 title, then he should be in F1 in 2020 or 2021, something like that. Just looking at some more comments. We'll move on to driver lineup news very soon. Han Solo, that's a great name. Stroll has a rich daddy. Money can't buy talent, but it can buy an F1 team. Exactly my point. Ronan Brady, sorry I'm late. I was watching the US Senate hearing. Don't worry, I understand. I've seen the news this week. I completely understand why you would be late. Thanks for joining though. We've still got another, I'd say, 20 minutes left of this stream. Zane, describe lucky. He works very hard to keep that podium. And if it wasn't for Bottas, Mercedes, he would have finished second. Williams had no chance against Mercedes power. Lucky, not really. When I say lucky, I mean that Hamilton had to pit and fall behind because of a headrest problem. The only reason Bottas was behind Stroll was because Raikkonen hit Bottas into the wall at turn 1 on lap 1. Raikkonen retired because of damage. Vettel had a penalty. Verstappen retired with an engine problem. The two Force Indias retired because they crashed into each other. Felipe Massa had a rear damper problem. Nico Hülkenberg hit the wall. I'd say Hülkenberg, Ocon and Vettel probably deserved to lose their positions down the field or out of the race. But people like Massa, Hamilton, Verstappen, Perez, you know, drivers like this, they didn't deserve to finish lower than Stroll at all. They were clearly faster and were doing better until unlucky moments. Andrew Drury, I'm actually going to miss Ericsson. I think we all are, for sure. Ronan Brady, I like Giovinazzi. He is surely better than Ericsson. Well, considering that two people are talking about that, you know what? We'll just go on to the driver lineup news right now. And if you didn't know, guys, earlier this week, Antonio Giovinazzi was announced as Marcus Ericsson's replacement at Sauber for 2019. He will drive alongside Kimi Raikkonen at Sauber. So it's Raikkonen and Giovinazzi at Sauber. Now, in my opinion, I'm going to, cover Giovinazzi first. I understand why people think he's good. He is a quick driver. I'm not going to doubt that. But in my opinion, from seeing him in GP2 and from seeing him in his 2 races in F1, I think he is maybe not as bad, but kind of reminiscent, and I've said this before, of the Italian Pasta Maldonado. no one can doubt his speed, and that's a very good thing to have, is the speed. But I don't think he has the head and the mental strength to not crash and to not get himself involved in silly accidents and silly incidents. He's done it in GP2. In F1, he had, in his 2 races at the start of 2017, he had, was it 2 accidents at the same corner in China, I think, or maybe 3. I can't remember exactly how many, but I know it was at least 2. And yeah, from what I've seen so far, of course we'll need to see more of him in 2019, but I just think he's very reminiscent of Maldonado. Very quick, not going to doubt that at all. Very, very quick, as we saw in practice 1. But I think he is very accident prone, and I think Sauber need to try and calm him down before the season gets going next season, because they might have to pay a lot of money in damages, because Giovinazzi can be a bit of a hothead sometimes, to say the least. And Marcus Ericsson, you know what? I don't think Ericsson deserves to lose his seat. And I know people give him criticism. I criticised him back in 2017. I said that Ericsson was the worst driver on the grid after 2017. And now I disagree with that view. I don't think he is the worst driver on the current grid. I think Hartley and Stroll are worse drivers. Ericsson this season hasn't been amazing. Hasn't been terrible though. I think he's been quite good. He scored points in Bahrain, a great drive in Bahrain, very underrated. Great drive in Austria. He basically, I think he did beat Charles Leclerc in that race. Very good drive from Marcus Ericsson. He scored points in Hockenheim, a very good drive there, and then scored points at Spa. He's been good this season. He deserves another season, in my opinion, at Sauber. If I was in charge of the team, I would have gone with Kimi Räikkönen and Marcus Ericsson, because I think that experience is something that is very important for a midfield team to have. It's great, you know, to throw young talent into a car. You know, it's great doing that, but with someone like Giovinazzi, I'm not sure that risk will pay off. I think Kimi and Marcus would have made for a better driver lineup. But guys, what do you think? Do you think Giovinazzi will work in F1, or do you agree with me that he can be quite accident prone sometimes? And for Marcus Ericsson, do you think it's a good thing that he's not in F1 next season, or do you agree with me that Marcus Ericsson should be in F1 for 2019? Let's see what some of you guys are saying in the chat. Ronan Brady, I think Ericsson has had, I think Ericsson had more than his chance though in F1. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But he has had a couple of decent seasons. For example, this season, I think, has been decent. And 2015, he was decent that season. 2016 and 2017, he didn't score points in those seasons. But we do have to remember, the Sauber in 2016 was only better than the Manor. And in 2017, he was driving the worst car on the grid. So, you know, we have to remember that when it comes to Marcus Ericsson. Andrew Drury, I'd have put Van Dorn in the car. If they didn't have links to Ferrari, and of course Alfa Romeo, I think they might have put Van Dorn in the car, but of course they're not going to. Nicholas, don't know why Kimi is not leaving. Kimi just wants to race. I don't think Kimi cares what car he's driving. I don't think he cares at all. As long as he's driving a car and having fun, I don't think Kimi cares at all. And I think that explains why Kimi has not been clinical enough to get pole positions when he should have in the past and race wins in the last few years, because he doesn't care, say, as much as Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen. He just doesn't have that fire in his belly anymore. Gina, Ericsson can be a new Kvyat. Not as good in the way of being dropped and later picked up. If Giovinazzi doesn't work out, then maybe Ericsson can get in there for 2020, but as I think it was Scotty said, if Mick Schumacher, you know, wins the championship in F3 and then maybe goes to F2 and wins the title there, then it might be Mick Schumacher at Sauber for 2020. Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Mick Schumacher, Giovinazzi, Marcus Ericsson and their careers in the next couple years. Ronan Brady, he will get better with time. Did Gasly not only just beat him in F2, he has talent to play with. I'm not doubting he has talent. He does have, you know, talent. You have to be talented to get into F1, for sure. I'll say, you know, Lance Stroll. As much as I don't like Lance Stroll as a driver, he clearly has talent or else he wouldn't be in F1. But, yeah, again, Giovinazzi does have the talent, but I'm not sure he has the complete package to be a success in F1. I don't see it. Spider Monkey says Stroll, Giovinazzi, Perez and Grosjean in 2019. Someone... Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of that, but okay. Nicholas, yeah, Mick will be easily brought on board. A second generation driver who is also quick. Hopefully he does have, or he does win the Euro F3 title and then goes into F2 and does well there. Because I think if he wins the F2 title, every single young driver program existing in F1 will try to sign him up. Every single one. Because he's a Schumacher. And we all know who his dad is, of course. Just looking at some more. Just trying to make sure I mention everyone's comments and questions. Blessed you. I thought when incidents happen, the good driver will always take advantage. That seems to hold when it's Hamilton capitalising on Vettel, but when it's Stroll in Baku, people say it's luck. What hatred is this? I understand your point, but Hamilton is only capitalising on Vettel's error. For, you know, that's one example. And also, I'm not saying that Lance Stroll... I think your example is kind of off, because Hamilton is deservedly capitalising on what Vettel's mistakes are. Stroll in Baku, he did capitalise deservedly on what Hülkenberg, Vettel did, and Ocon did, but you have to remember there were drivers that were ahead of him who had unlucky retirements caused by other drivers or by their own car. Hamilton deservedly beats Vettel or capitalises on Vettel because Vettel makes a mistake. Stroll did deservedly capitalise on 2 or 3 positions, but he did not deserve to finish third. There were at least 3 drivers that were more deserving, sorry, for that third place. Ronan Brady, Grosjean staying at Haas is the most undeserved seat on the grid. I know you will disagree, but he is not the same as the Grosjean of Lotus. We'll get onto that in a moment. Gina, isn't Mick a Merc driver? I don't think he is. I don't think he is signed up officially to their program. His car is powered by Mercedes in that series. I don't think that really matters because Prima are linked to Ferrari. So it doesn't really matter, you know, what's powering him currently to the F3 title. But yeah, I don't think he is signed up to the Mercedes program, but I'll have a check just to make sure tonight in case he is. Zane, he deserved third, he worked for it, he didn't cheat. I'm not saying he did cheat, I'm saying that there were 3 drivers more deserving of finishing in third. He deserved to finish in the points and say P6 or P7, but not third. No way. Say Rugara, what's the point of doing this in Russia? I would love if this was the, say, German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, I think that would be great. I think it would. We've had races at the Nürburgring in F1 at this time of year before, in the 90s. But yeah, I just can't believe that we still need to be coming to this track. And it's on the calendar, I believe, until 2025. So it's not going anywhere. Ronan Brady, do you think Mercedes regret renewing the contract of Bottas due to the Ocon situation? Would you take Ocon over Bottas? I think Ocon is probably better than Bottas, but at the end of the day, Bottas deserves to be at Mercedes for 2019. He does. He hasn't done anything this season, which for me means that he doesn't deserve to be at Mercedes. He's done everything I think he can. Of course, he's been very unlucky. Baku, China, probably could have had 2 race wins there. Austria, he's been unlucky this season. And I actually think in the first half of the season, he was about on par with Lewis Hamilton, which is very good. But with those reliability issues and just plain unlucky moments, I think his confidence dropped, and that's why he's been quite a bit behind Hamilton for the last few races. So, yeah, that's why Bottas, as of late, hasn't been too great. But I think overall for 2018, he deserves a seat for 2019, for sure. Right, I'll read one more comment or question, and then I'll move on to the second piece of news. Ivan Jones, do you think F1 new regulations will make following better for 2019? I hope it does. I think it will make it better, but not massively. I think it will be... How do I describe this? The cars will probably be able to get 2 or 3 tenths closer to each other, but I don't think that's going to be maybe a massive enough difference to please everyone. So I think further changes in 2021 or 2023 is what will need to happen for eventually the dirty air to get not completely removed, because of course you can't really remove it, but removed enough for us to get consistent, great racing. But now we will move on from that news and go on to the news about Haas, who are going to be retaining their driver lineup from what they had this year, or what they have right now in 2018. They're retaining that for 2019. Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen. For Magnussen, it wasn't in doubt. Magnussen clearly deserved to be at Haas for 2019. As of late, he hasn't been too great, but the first half of 2018, he was one of the best drivers from the midfield for sure. No doubt about it. Very quick, a lot more consistent than he was in years past, in 2014 and 2016 and 2017. Kevin Magnussen, for me, this year has had his best season in F1 and clearly deserves to stay at Haas. But Romain Grosjean, I understand why people think Grosjean should have been dropped. I understand why, because at the start of the season, his pace wasn't too great and he was making a lot of silly mistakes and having some quite embarrassing crashes. But since his home race, even though he crashed out in qualifying, since his home race, his pace has been very, very strong. And I think over the... How many races have we had now? What, 15 races that we've had so far? Over the 15 races, I think Grosjean has done enough to keep a seat at Haas for 2019. His pace has been good enough. At the start of the season, it wasn't as good as it was now, but it has been good enough. And he has made clear improvements since the start of the season. So I think Grosjean does deserve to stay at Haas. I clearly understand why people would think he doesn't deserve to be at Haas because of those mistakes in the early part of the season. But that was then, and this is now. Grosjean is looking a lot better now than he was, say, at the Spanish Grand Prix or the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. But guys, what do you think about this piece of news? Do you agree with Haas keeping the same driver lineup, or would you have changed it for, you know, someone else? And if you were going to put a new driver into this team, who would you have put? Would you have maybe kept Kimi at Ferrari and put Leclerc at Haas? Would you have put Ocon at Haas? Verline? Who would you put at Haas instead of Magnussen or Grosjean? Let's see what some of you guys think of that in the chat right now. Gina, Roman is good on his day. He has a bad season, but he can be better in 2019. He's definitely good for Haas. Roman this season, he has had a lot of off days for sure, and he has had a couple races where it has been his day. For example, Austria, races like that, or Spa, even Monza, despite Haas of course being disqualified. But I think, as you said, on his day, Roman is very, very good. And I think Roman is getting back more towards the performances he normally does when he's on his absolute best. So I think if Grosjean can have a better start next season than he had in 2018 this season, and can continue the speed, then I think Grosjean next season can have a good season. I don't see why not. Nathan, not surprising, stability is probably what Haas needs to get their consistency. Stability when it comes to the driver lineup is something that I think all the teams should be looking for. Maybe except Toro Rosso, because basically that is a team that is ready-made to test out young drivers. But if I was a team boss, I would try to keep the same lineup every year for as long as possible until one of the drivers either retired or was just not performing well enough to keep their seat. That's why I agree with Mercedes keeping with Hamilton and Bottas. That's why I agree with Haas keeping Magnussen and Grosjean, because those drivers, none of those drivers have shown evidence that they're not good enough to hold on to their seats for the remaining seasons, 2019 or 2020. Gina, and if Ferrari's engine is superior, Haas and Roman will fly in 2019. If Ferrari can pull out more of an advantage when it comes to the engine, maybe, but Haas need to get the aero right if they're going to have a good season overall like they've had this season. Andrew Drury, Haas isn't a Ferrari B team that they just buy parts off of them. They want their own drivers, not Ferrari juniors like Leclerc. Yeah, they're not the B team of Ferrari. I think Sauber are pretty much. That's why Sauber have Kimi and Giovinazzi, because Kimi still has a big connection to Ferrari, and Giovinazzi is under contract with Ferrari as a young driver. So, yes, Sauber is definitely, I'd say, the B team in that situation. Let's see what other people are saying in the chat right now. Just trying to make sure I don't miss out on any comments. Ivan Jones, Roman Grosjean is not good enough. Could you comment further as to why you think that? I think, who was it? I think it was Nicholas said that he disagrees with Roman getting a seat at Haas for 2019. Also, I'd want him to comment further why he thinks that. Then we can have a minor debate for the last 5 or 10 minutes of this stream. Spider Monkey Chazza, do you think who do you think is better, Grosjean or Ocon? I would go Ocon. I think Grosjean is a good driver, but I don't think he is as good as Esteban Ocon. I think Ocon is very quick, but I think the key difference between the two is that Ocon is way more consistent than Grosjean. And just think if Grosjean is in the situation of Ocon right now, do you think he would be kicked out? Grosjean would have a lot less of a chance of finding a seat if he was in Ocon's position, for sure, because Ocon is rated a lot higher in the paddock than Roman is. So yeah, it would be a lot harder for him to find a seat. Ronan Brady, I think he wasn't good in 2017 either, so that's my reason for thinking he should go. In 2017, I didn't think Roman was that bad. I thought Roman actually was quite decent considering the Haas wasn't that good at times in 2017. The Haas was still very poor on its brakes. Of course, they fixed that now, but last year it was so poor on the brakes. And the aero of the car compared to now was nothing close to what it is like now. So I think Roman and K-Mag did well with the machinery they had in 2017. I'll try and find some more comments in the chat to read out before I go. If you've got your remaining comments, make sure to put it in the chat right now. Andrew Drury, there is another Grade 1 track near Moscow that looks a lot better. If they have to have a race in Russia, I don't understand why they don't race there instead. I've heard of this track, but I've never seen it. I'd have to see what it looks like first. But, well, if it's better, then, yeah, why not go there? Just looking at some more comments in the chat. Thanks to everyone for coming along for this practice review and putting your comments in the chat and getting involved as always. Spider Monkey, if Ericsson getting dropped, who is Grosjean going to complain? Who knows? Maybe Giovinazzi. Maybe he'll just blame it always on Sauber driver. Who knows? Ronan Brady, the Ferrari talk for Grosjean has gone, thank God. I was one of the people that was promoting that whole Grosjean to Ferrari stuff because I thought if the Haas was good this season, like it has been, I thought Grosjean would perform and put himself in the frame for a drive at Ferrari for 2019. But of course that has not come about because Leclerc has been so good, but also because Grosjean wasn't impressing Ferrari or any other teams enough at the right times. He just wasn't. He wasn't at all. Andrew Drury, Giovinazzi will actually hit him though. Wouldn't be surprised if Giovinazzi hit every single driver in the midfield next year. Wouldn't be surprised at all. And he'll probably hit a lot of walls. Most likely at Monaco and Singapore for sure. Ronan Brady inconsistent though in 2017. Yeah, at times he was, but again the Haas wasn't that great, so yeah, I give him a slight excuse with that because again the Haas was quite difficult to drive, and at the end of last year the Haas was quite slow. Spider Monkey, Buddha International Circuit is good. Do you think it will return? Should return to the calendar? I would like it to. I thought that straight that they had, that long straight was great, and the braking zone at the end was absolutely what you need for great overtaking and close battling. But I don't think the country of India can actually afford to have the race anymore. I thought that was why the race was removed off of the calendar, but I'd love to see it back. I'd love to see it back. It was a great track and the fans were so enthusiastic when the race was there in 2011, 2012 and 2013. Right, if anyone has any remaining comments or questions, make sure to put it in the chat right now. I'll be coming off in about 2 or 3 minutes. So, yeah, make sure to put your comments and questions in the chat before I go. Spider Monkey, yep, some legal issue. Yeah, I think it was something to do with... Yeah, it was either a legal issue or some financial issue. Because I remember there was some court battle over it. I think that was the reason. I think they were supposed to hold the Indian Grand Prix there in 2015, but there was some court battle for it not to be held there. I can't remember, but yeah, something went awry there. Ronan Brady, same person who designed that track, designed Abu Dhabi. Well, they can't... Herman Tilke can't get it right all the time, can he? Sometimes with the piece of land you've been given, you know, you try to do the best you can, but again, I think when it comes to Abu Dhabi, because of where and the type of land it's on and where it is in the world, I don't think there was much he could do with the track. He was kind of limited to what he could, or, you know, the area he could design around. Just looking at some more comments just to make sure I haven't missed any. Andrew Drury, the best thing about Yas Marina is the theme park next to it. Yeah, and probably the fireworks at the end of the season as well. The racing, forget about it. Andrew Drury, the best thing... oh no, I just read that. Gina, do you think Leclerc can beat Vettel already in 2019? And if so, do you think Ferrari dropping Seb? If Leclerc beats Vettel, then I think that completely destroys any chance after that of Vettel being the #1 driver at Ferrari. We'll have to see, of course, if Leclerc does beat Vettel. But if Leclerc beats Vettel in 2019 and then beats him, say, in 2020 and 2021, then I think Vettel will leave Ferrari by 2021 for sure, because he won't want to stay in a team where he is #2, basically, to Leclerc. If Leclerc, of course, beats him, say, 2 or 3 seasons in a row. Ronan Brady, Abu Dhabi is my favourite track, actually. Maybe your taste in tracks is not too great. I'll just leave it at that. I really don't like Abu Dhabi. It's very similar to Russia in terms of just how poor of a track it is. Spider Monkey, best thing is the pit lane exit. Yeah, of Yas Marina. It's unique at least, but yeah, it's not a good track at all. Right, I think, guys, I will end the stream there. Thank you guys for coming along for this practice review. Just to let you guys know, I forgot to put a graphic up on the screen. Sorry guys about that. About what I'm doing for the rest of the weekend in terms of my uploading schedule. Just to let you guys know, at 12 PM tomorrow, live, I will be going live for the qualifying watch along for the Russian Grand Prix. So make sure to come along at 12 PM UK time for that. I'll be live until 2:30 PM UK time, something like that. And then on Sunday morning at 8 AM UK time will be a full review of qualifying. The reason I'm delaying it, say from the night of qualifying after, you know, the night of qualifying until the day after, is because I want to include a lot more detail to my qualifying reviews, which will carry over to next year as well. So yeah, I'm moving the qualifying reviews from now on to the day after. So yeah, that's what's going down for qualifying for the Russian Grand Prix on the channel. Don't forget, guys, to subscribe to the channel either on the bottom right of the screen, or click on my channel name, or click on the link in the description down below. Like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below what did you think of practice for the Russian Grand Prix, and what do you think about the news about Giovinazzi going to Sauber for 2019, and what do you think about Haas retaining their driver lineup for 2019 also. As well, don't forget to join our Discord server, a link below down in the description. We now have 70 people in our server. It's an ever-growing community, so hopefully you guys can go over that and join that. And if you want to keep up to date in terms of notifications, Discord is probably the best place to keep up to date with me. So go over there and do that, and go over there and join the server and get those notifications. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, another great place to keep up to date with what I'm doing on the channel. Link below down in the description to my Twitter. And don't forget to check out my website, chazerhd.com. Another way to keep up to date with me in the world of Formula 1. But guys, until 12 PM UK time tomorrow, where I will be live for the qualifying watch along for the 2018 Russian Grand Prix, which is probably going to be the most exciting part of the weekend, let's be honest. I will see all of you then.